Hello, my name is Brittany, and I'm going to be talking about 12 Community Safety Initiatives Grant Writing Workshop for Youth. The plan of the workshop is to go over the process of applying for grants and how to write youth grant applications. So you may be wondering, what is a grant? To begin, a grant is a sum of money given by an organization for a particular purpose. But grants are more than just money. Grants are a great way to get started on projects, to be involved and improve the community, and to build relationships and partnerships with funders. Within the workshop, groups of 3 to 5 individuals are asked to brainstorm project ideas for their community. You can do this activity by yourself as well. Think of this question: why does your community need you? Your project ideas can be community-based, relating to arts, music, business, and much more. Some examples include organizing a collective activity or project, teaching a free class in something that you love to do, or organizing and hosting an event. Now, before you actually start writing, make sure that you do your research and read the grant guidelines so that you know what the funder is looking for and what projects they may have already funded. You will also need to contact the funder before you start writing your proposal. Remember that the relationship that you build is important. Think of your funder as a resource and ask questions. You will need to connect with people, and they will then connect you to the funds. Lastly, know the submission deadline. If you miss the application deadline, you will not receive the grant for your project. After you have a project idea and know what to do before you start writing, you can get started on the grant writing process. Typically, youth grant applications require a simplified version of the 6 main components that are necessary for grant proposals, which are problem statements, goals and objectives, activities, budget, outcomes, and evaluation. The first thing that you will need to do for your grant application is come up with your problem statement. Ask yourself, what community problem or issue does my project solve? What area of need or gap are you trying to fill? This is the reason for your proposal. So now that we know what the different needs are and what our problem statement is, the next step is to figure out how we're going to meet those needs through your project. To do this, you'll need to create goals and objectives for your project. Again, remember specific criteria and guidelines for the grant that you're applying for. What criteria are funders looking for? Does your project match the guidelines? This is why it's important to contact the funders first and discuss any questions that you may have. This also ensures that your project aligns with what the funder is looking for. Goals and objectives can be confusing as the terms are often used interchangeably. For grant writing, goals are statements that are big and broad, whereas objectives are statements that are narrow and specific. For example, a goal would be your end result, and your objectives are the steps that you will take to meet your goal. For developing your project objectives, use the SMART method. Make sure that your objectives are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. The next component of your grant application is the activities, which can sometimes also be called methods or inputs. Your activities will come from your objectives. For youth grant applications, they often ask, how are youth involved in planning and implementing your project? Start off by making a task list. What will you do? What kinds of things will you need to get the job done? Where will you do it? Do you need volunteers? And when will you do it? How will you be upkeeping your project? Come up with a tentative timeline for your activities. Remember that grants do not happen overnight. Next, you will create a budget based on activities planned and required materials for your project. You will need to list the item, think of what you will need for your activities and to complete your project. Do you need resources or supplies? Do you need to rent space? Then write a brief description of the item and the amount or how much the item will cost. Your best guess is good enough. If you have any non-monetary items, such as volunteer time, food, or supply donations, these will be listed as in-kind donations in your budget. Also, if you have already been given money towards your project, you must list the other grant or donation in your budget as revenue. Remember that if you receive a grant, the money must be used as specified by the budget for your project. If this changes, you must contact your funder. Now you are ready to begin figuring out what the outcomes of your project might be. Your project outcomes are the results and products that occur when the objectives and goals are met. They tell the story of how people and communities were impacted by the project. You may need to create a hypothesis or an if-then-and statement. What do you expect to happen, and what impact is your project going to make? Finally, the evaluation component of your application will determine how you will measure your success. Ask yourself, how will you know if you made an impact? Refer back to your goals, objectives, and activities. For evaluations, there are two types that you can use. There are qualitative evaluations and quantitative evaluations. Qualitative evaluations are subjective, meaning that the researcher's interpretation of events is important. The researcher may use tools such as interviews, feedback forms, and observation of activities. The second type of evaluation that you may use are quantitative evaluations, which are used to analyze data, numbers, and values. For a quantitative evaluation, the researcher uses tools such as surveys and questionnaires to collect numerical data. Some funders will also ask for updates on your project or an evaluation summary to be done upon completion of your project. Now you're ready to begin writing your youth grant application. Thank you for listening to 12 CSI's grant writing workshop, and if you have any questions, you may email Brittany at 12csi.ca.